Hi. So this is actually the third time I'm trying to film this podcast because I keep stopping because I feel kind of embarrassed or I feel like I'm not making sense. But this is the third time I'm filming this, and I want you guys to know that this is a very special podcast to me because it's called Love After Love. And before I continue with what I want to say for the third time, I want you guys to, if you haven't watched the first three podcasts that I ever made, they're public, and it might be good for you to go watch that because you will understand a little bit more about what's going on, because otherwise you might be a little confused about what you hear in this podcast. And it'll just give you a little bit more of a full story. Um, So the reason why this podcast is quite special for me is because many of you know that I went through a really difficult time this past year. And I don't want to harp on the details of what happened to me because you'll find some of those details in the first three podcasts anyway. But I want to focus on love after love. But I will give you a little bit of a timeline in right now, just so that you can understand what happened in a nutshell. Many of you who followed me for a while can tell that I'm very happy now in my dancing and in my personal life. It's so weird to talk about my personal life again after so many months. Um, but yeah, it was not easy to get to this point, and every day is still, a struggle in many ways, but a beautiful struggle. And I'll explain more about that later. But first off, let me just give you a little timeline. I'm going to breeze through this because I don't want to harp on the details. But last July, in the beginning of July, my ex dance partner and ex husband, soon to be ex husband because the process is long, um, ended our dance partnership. And we had been having a lot of issues in our marriage as well. And but we were trying to make things work in both the dancing and the marriage, and he ended the dance partnership, and it was pretty clear that he also ended that marriage at that point. That was the beginning of July. I met my dance partner on October 13th. We had our first tryout that day, and then about 2 weeks later, we decided to dance together. On November 25th, I ran into my ex with our longtime pro-am student. I ran into them in Central Park. And long story short, I found out that he'd been cheating on me with her for 2 years, maybe more, and I had no idea. No idea. That was November 25th, and that was on Thanksgiving. What's really interesting is right after I ran into them in the park, I was scheduled to have Thanksgiving dinner with my new dance partner. So that was a really interesting day. But then around Christmas time, around New Year's, my dance partner and I became more than just dance partners. And yeah, and now we're here on March 18th. So the beginning of my new love story sounds so sappy, but it's not sappy because, as you can see, it's quite strange, right? Like, this is probably the strangest start to a dance partnership and a personal relationship that I ever had. And I know that I will speak a lot more about this strange beginning. That's what this whole podcast really is about, because I know that many of you are already having thoughts in your mind about my potentially my judgment, right? Because many of you also know that my dance partner is much younger than me also. But where do I even begin? So let's begin here. Dancing is my number one priority. Like, I think that I stayed in my last partnership, my last marriage, so long because I was so attached to the dancing. I was so attached to our product together. I was so attached to the vision of our dance future. That was a big reason, not the only reason, but that was a big reason why I couldn't let go, because letting go of a marriage is already hard enough, and let alone letting go of dance. He was like my dance dream, you know. Um I couldn't, right? Like, obviously in ballroom dancing you have a partner, so you can't do it alone, and he was my partner. He was the most important man in my life because he was not just my husband, he was the person who could make my dance dreams come true. Anyway, the reason why I start with this thing of the dance is most important to me is because I think that it saved me in many ways from poor decision making. I when my dance partner and I touched for the very first time, the chemistry was immediate, like the connection was immediate. And of course, I'm not going to deny that I was really hurting, and he was for sure a soothing ointment on my terrible, terrible wounds. Um, but for a while in the beginning, like about 2 to 3 months, I was really struggling with trying to make sense of how I felt, because did I like him because of him, or did I really like him because I was lonely and I was hurting, right? Because if I started to have relations with him for the wrong reasons, I would be jeopardizing my dancing to no end. I would really be jeopardizing my dancing, because very quickly I realized that I wanted to dance with him no matter if we could be together or not. And I asked myself, I came to this conclusion by asking myself and imagining hundreds and hundreds of times, like, what if he doesn't like me like that? Because for the first 2 to 3 months, he showed zero, like, I could not tell at all that he was into me in that way, at all. And I thought to myself, I imagined hundreds of times, what if he gets a girlfriend? What if he doesn't like me like that, right? I mean, I'm quite a bit older. What if he doesn't like me like that? What if he gets a girlfriend right now? Would I still want to dance with him? Do I want to dance with him for the right reasons? And the answer was always yes, I would still dance with him. I would still do it. And so that's how I knew that I really wanted to dance with him for the right reasons. But of course, I had started to develop feelings, and I didn't know if something would happen between us more than just dancing, if I would be getting into that for the right reasons, right? Because I was still so much in my healing process from my ex. So I really tried to, and honestly, I wasn't very good at it, but he was. I tried to keep a distance, even though I was not very good at it, but he was very good at it. I think I told you guys before that he slept in the same bed with me multiple times, and he didn't touch me. He didn't touch me. I've never met a man who sleeps in the same bed with me, who's straight and doesn't even try anything, you know? It was just very funny, because at one point I was literally like, are you straight? Like, and he was like, yes. And I was like, okay, just checking, sorry. Anyway, yeah, it's funny. Okay, so anyway, around Christmas time, he told me that, actually, he really likes me like that. And I was in shock. because I just told you guys that he wouldn't touch me, right? And he was quite cold um, to me. We were very professional with each other for the first 2 to 3 months. And so I was quite shocked. And then he told me, he said, it's because dancing is also very important to me. Dancing is for both of us, the most important. And he said, I didn't want to jeopardize the dancing. I didn't just want to, you know, play around with you and then, right, because I was in the moment or whatever. And I was like, wow, that's quite mature. But yeah, that's why, I told you guys that the dancing being the priority for me was quite and for him is quite a a lifesaver in terms of my decision making. And even when we got together personally, like we were still sort of we were still feeling things out in those two realms, like in dancing and in our personal relationship. Now, that was probably the most stressful time for me. And I guess this is the most meaningful part, I think, of the podcast, because I've never been in a situation in my entire life where I felt so much happiness and so much pain at the exact same time. Like, I've never experienced it. It's such a strange feeling. Exacerbated by the fact that, for example, I have to see my ex with his girl every single day at the studio. About the same time. So sorry, one more thing on the timeline. So I ran into them on Thanksgiving, and then if like literally the day after, my ex announced that he would be dancing with her, like officially. Prior to that, he, from what I heard, had not made that decision. But after I ran into them and there was this whole drama, yeah, he did decide. So I have to see him every single day with her at the same studio, um, for hours, because we practice at the exact same time. We attend the same group classes with our coach. We do the same run throughs with our coach. So I never had a day break from seeing my ex. Like I would see them dance, I would see them canoodle, right? And meanwhile, I'm with my guy and I'm so happy with him, but I have to deal with my ex. I've talked about this in the last podcast, right? And on top of everything, I'm starting a new relationship with my man, and I have so much love that I would like to share with him. But at the same time, I'm still healing. So this has definitely been the hardest like thing I've ever done in my life, because I didn't want my triggers, and I was definitely triggered every day, to affect my partnership, my new partnership, and to affect my relationship. Every decision, big or small, I had to assess, okay, is this coming from, is what I'm about to do, is what I'm about to say coming from authentic, right? My authentic self? Or is it coming because of being triggered? Is it coming because I'm afraid? Is it coming because I'm insecure? Is it coming because I'm still healing, right? Or I have PTSD, right? So I had to be really careful, because I cared so much about my dance partnership, and I was starting to care so much about my personal relationship. A lot of people have asked me, like, why do you date your dance partner? There's so many partnerships which are purely professional and they have a great relationship, right? The two people, why is it that you like to date your partner? So first of all, I've had partnerships where I haven't dated my partner. I've had quite a few partnerships in my career. And the answer to that question is that I think that there's two parts to this question, to this answer, I think. The first part is that when you find a dance partner, you are looking for certain qualities that would be compatible with you. And for me, that goes much beyond the dancing. That's probably the most important, of course, right? But for me to have the idea of a long-term partnership where you work as a team and you grow together as not just dancers, but people, that requires a certain level of compatibility. And because there are so many qualities that my partner has that are compatible with me, not just in dancing, of course, like I feel quite naturally connected with him and attracted to him. That's like the first thing, the first part of the answer. And the second part of the answer is that I think the way that I was raised in the dancing, like from day one, I was trained to truly connect to my partner as a woman and also demand that my partner connect with me and interact with me as a man. Now, I'm not going to go into gender roles because I know that's a slippery slope. But I guess what I mean is that I really appreciate and look for a partner who allows me to be my most healthy, feminine, authentic self. And I'm most interested to dance with someone who is very much authentically in his masculine self. I am a girl, a Latin girl who I want to follow my leader, like follow in terms of dance, but also on a psychological level. I would like to give to him. I would like to trust him. And I think that all of those factors combined foster a sense of attraction. Now, attraction is not enough, right? Chemistry, connection, and a few compatible areas is probably not enough to guarantee that that person is suitable for a life partner. But I'm also at a point in my life where I realize that anything can happen at any time, and life is very short. And I'll explain a little bit more now about why I call it love, what I have now. But anything can happen, life is very short, and when you grasp happiness, I think, you know, to I don't think that love is something that you can tread carefully in. I think that you have to dive in with a lot of faith. And most importantly, this is probably the most meaningful thing I'm going to say in this podcast, but it's just a choice. Like, I chose him to be my person. Just like I chose him to be my partner. Of course, he has to make that choice too, but I chose from my end that I'm going to invest myself in this man because I think he's worthy of my investment. It's just a choice. Yes, there's so many things that attracted me to him, and there's so many things that I feel like, he's going to be an amazing life partner one day, if not already, right? But like even more one day because he's young. But yeah, I just made a choice. I made a choice. So did I fall in love? I definitely fell into attraction, but love is different. Love is a choice for me. I, what was I going to say? I wanted to segue into something, but now I forgot. Oh, yes. So on this topic of love being a choice, I remember how I told you that this has been the strangest beginning to any relationship I've ever had, right? Because of how quickly things moved, because of the dancing component combined within it, because of the healing that was going on together with the pleasure, right? The pain and the pleasure together. So it's the most interesting start to a relationship I've ever had. And oh my God, my brain is tofu. What was I about to say? I'm just thinking about some memories. Okay, so now I remember. Basically, how do I know that it is real love, I guess? How do I know that it is not infatuation? At least not anymore. Honeymoon period is over. How do I know that it is not from my fear of being alone, my fear of not being loved, right? You guys who have watched the first few podcasts know that my inner child, what my inner child looks like, right? I was watching this interview that Giselle Bundchen did like several days ago where she spoke about life after divorce because she was married to Tom Brady and then they filed for divorce, I think last year sometime. Anyway, and what she said was the reason why it was so painful was because for her it was the death of a fairy tale. Like ever since she was a little girl, she dreamed about this fairy tale, like this fairy tale love. And she thought that she had found it with Tom Brady. And that's why it was so devastating that things ended. Because for it was the death of her fantasy since she was a little girl. And I've spoken about this in the podcast before, but I was very much in the same situation with my ex relationship. I was so in love with the idea of us, like fairy tale. It was a fairy tale for me. Like if you guys knew how we met, right? Like I love dancing so much and I went all the way to Venice, Italy for the very first time. My first time in Italy, I was in Venice to meet this man who to potentially, dance with him. And we fell in love in Venice, under the lights by the water. Like we fell in love. We fell in love with our dream of dance. We fell in love with our dream of being together. Um, like he was so handsome and he was Italian, but he was also like Eastern European, so it was like mixed. And he was such a gentleman and we moved to America together. We moved to New York together. Like it was like my dream, never in a like it never occurred to me that things would end because fairy tales don't end badly, right? It's happily ever after. Like it never occurred to me that, you know, that we wouldn't be together forever. We would be world champions together and then we'd be together for the rest of our lives and have a family and like, yeah, we adopted cats, we had a family. And even when things were not, you know, right anymore or real, right? It was still like the fairy tale was still real in my mind. And I think that that was one of the biggest fallacies of that love that I had, is that I didn't see him and what we were for him and what we were. as time went on and as things changed. You guys know from my podcast before that because of my inner child, I had many issues that my inner child's fears and insecurities like ravaged my relationship to no end, and his similar. And we had a lot of fundamental incompatibilities that I refused to acknowledge and was in denial about for a very long time because I was so attached to our fairy tale. And yeah, so couldn't see him for who he was, couldn't be my true authentic self inside of that relationship. And that's why, ultimately things didn't work out, and why both of us ended up getting hurt a lot throughout the relationship and even at the end. But I think that my point is that in my new relationship, I very much am not in love with a fantasy. I didn't have any expectations going in that he would like me, that he would choose me. I have no expectations in terms of like what might happen in the future. And part of that is because of our age difference, but part of that is also just because I have learned that anything can happen, right? For the very first time, because I've worked so much on my inner child, I am able to be my true authentic self. For the most part, there's still struggle in that, of course, every day. But I can also therefore see him for who he is and not what my inner child wants him to be, because my inner child is afraid. One of the things that I've told you about him that I think I told you about him. I told you this in my third podcast, but he's very we're very similar. Like that's part of the reason why we connect, because we're very similar. Our inner children are different, but they have a lot of similarities. And I think that the thing that we both have, a similar upbringing, even though we grew up in completely different parts of the world. But we have a very similar upbringing, and therefore we match. There are fundamental compatibility components between him and I, which really help with the relationship for sure. And I think that most importantly for me, he's a very strong man. And when I say strong, I mean specifically that he knows himself. He knows what he likes. He knows what he doesn't like. Actually, he told me like from day one that if he doesn't like something and he's not okay with something, he will tell me immediately, and he apologizes if it's very brutal because he can't help himself. And actually, I've like run into this situation multiple times. It's like crashing into a brick wall, kind of. But at least, he doesn't pretend that he likes something when he doesn't. Do you see why that's so important to me, right? He's very much knowing of himself, and he has his boundaries. And that's very helpful for me. That's very healthy for a relationship in general. And because he's very self-aware, and because he's strong enough to say no, like he told me a couple weeks ago. He said, I'm not the type of person who would be in a relationship that's unhappy just because I'm afraid of being alone. I would rather be alone. Like he would say things like this. And not only does that make me more respecting of him and also attracted, right? Because this man knows what he wants and knows what he likes and what he doesn't like, and is not afraid to go for it. But it also makes me trust him. It makes me trust him because I know that I'm dealing with the real thing right here. What you see is what you get. And I think that my ex, that was more difficult for him, and it may be because of his upbringing, and maybe because he grew up in Italy. It's different. My man grew up in Ukraine, so, but I'm not going to go into that because I have no idea. I'm just saying that it's a different feeling. It's a breath of fresh air for me. It allows me to trust the person that is in front of me. And because I trust him, because I feel like I really respect him, I'm able to, and this is what I feel is the reason why I know it's love, because I want to and constantly see the world through his eyes. Again, it's a choice, but he makes it easy for me to make that choice. He makes it easy for me to make that choice. I choose to see the world through his eyes. I've never done that. I've always been very arrogant. And for those of you who watch the podcast, it comes from my inner child. This arrogance, it's very hard for me to really want to see things from another person's perspective in the past. And that was one of the big issues in my last relationship. I'm gonna, be honest with you. But with Anton, he makes it very easy for me to want to do that. It's not easy to do that, but he makes it easier, right? It's not easy to step into someone else's shoes because you see your blind spots and then you get pissed because, oh my God, I didn't know that was a blind spot. Like the perfectionism inner child in me is like, no, 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 did I make a mistake? Could I have done it better? I'm not good enough. So, but I see the world through his eyes, and it's a beautiful new way of seeing the world. And I also can see myself through his eyes because I'm part of that world, and it's an interesting version of me, like I see things that are good that I didn't recognize, but I also see things that are bad that I didn't know. I've learned so much and I've grown so much because I have this person whose eyes I can see through. And for me, that's love, choosing to do that, right? Because it's so, I don't know, it's so lonely to always see the world through your own eyes. It's so limited. Let's put it that way. It's very limited. And because I have him, I've grown so much in my dancing. I've grown so much as a person, right? Like I didn't realize my limitations in my dance until I saw them through him. And same thing, like, I don't know, like random things. I'll give you guys some examples. But I've always come across as like someone who thinks that I have a relatively good education, right? Thanks to my parents. But I realized I have a fear of numbers. I never realized that. It affects my dancing, timing. It also affects my business. Like I don't like to deal with numbers. I'm terrible with accounting. I'm terrible with all of that stuff. I don't even think I am paying my taxes correctly. Anyway, I have a fear of numbers. He loves numbers. And I didn't realize that I had a fear of numbers until I saw someone who loves numbers. And I'm like, wait a second. Not only am I bad with numbers, I actually think I'm terrified of it. And it's one thing that I'm trying to deal with, because if I don't deal with it, I'm going to have a lot of issues in life, because being relatively good with numbers is quite important when you're, a business owner, right? And you're the only one. It's quite important in dancing. I mean, so many things. Like a lot of you have said, like, your dancing is so different with him in a good way. And it's true because I have started to realize a lot of things that I didn't realize before because he'll point it out in a very loving, gentle way, or I'll just notice because I'm watching through his eyes, you know? So that's how I know it's love because I think I made a choice to do that and I never chose to do that before. I know this podcast is called Love After Love, but I think the two types of love were very different. One was an immature love, the first one, and the second is a mature love. And honestly, like when I film this podcast, I'm kind of like thinking to myself, when you film something and you put it out there, it's out there forever. Like these 4 podcasts, like it's gonna be out there forever, the first 3 and this one. And who knows what could happen in 1 year? Who knows what could happen in 5 years, 10 years, right? Like maybe he and I are not together anymore after like some time, or I don't know, maybe he will hurt me. Um, who knows, right? Or maybe we will stop dancing together for some reason or another. But I'm not so afraid of, sharing with you guys how I feel right now in the moment. I'm not afraid of sharing with you guys my hopes and dreams too, right? And just knowing that anything could happen and what I have right now, I've never been so happy. I've never been so happy in my entire life because partly because I know that anything can happen, partly because I know that not everything is meant to last forever and most things don't last forever, you know? And yeah, it did definitely cause me some anxiety. You know, it does cause anxiety from time to time. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. This has been the most uncertain situation that I've been in, also. But I know that it's love, and so I know that I've made this choice and I'm somehow pulled to make this choice over and over again every single day, every single moment of every single day. So it ends when I it ends when it ends. It ends when I choose to stop making this choice. And as long as I continue to make this choice every single day, right? What is this quote that I really like? The only love you keep is the love you give away. Something like that, right? Yeah. And to be honest, like, it's been, like I said, it's been really hard to heal and love at the same time, right? But because when I was healing, I was dealing with a lack of self-love. There was so much self-loathing that I had for what happened to me. It's like, it's one thing to be split up with as a dance partner. It's another thing to be split up with as a wife. It's another thing to, you know, to find out that um there was cheating involved, because that really, I kind of felt very depleted in my worth as a dancer, as a woman, right? um as a person in general, like, and I had to deal with that. And when you don't have enough self-love, it's very difficult to love another person, right? Because you're in survival mode. You're just trying to make it through the day together with you. You know what I'm saying? And like, and so part of the motivation for me to embrace my inner child and learn to love myself, which has improved my well-being to no end, and also my dancing, is because I wanted to be a good partner for my new partner. I wanted to be able to give him love. And I knew that in order to do that, I needed to heal my inner child. And that's also how I know that it's love. Because it wasn't about, okay, when can I take from you? When can I take from you more love for myself? to make myself feel better. No, it was actually, how can I heal myself so that I can give you love? Like, I never experienced that kind of maturity in my relationship. But as soon as I felt this intrinsic and authentic motivation to give rather than take, I realized that this is the real deal. What else? Hmm. I haven't been very actively posting about our relationship, partly because he's a private person, but also because I'm just genuinely so present all the time that I don't have a mind to pick up my phone and take a video or post a story. Um, but yeah, it's I think that's also how you know it's real, because with my ex, I think I said this in a podcast, but um I never felt from the get-go that things matched. And I know that sounds crazy because it really seems like we were a perfect match, but that's because I created that image like externally. Like, I did so many videos and posts about our love story and our cute moments and all of that because I wanted it to be more real than it actually was. And but the truth of it was that I felt a mismatch from the beginning, but I was again so in love with the fairy tale that I just didn't see the cracks in the glass, like the tiny little cracks that eventually that whole glass came shattering on top of us. I just refused to see it. And all the fights that we had with my ex, they just built so much resentment because they were all unmetabolized, unresolved, unprocessed. It was just so much resentment built between the two of us over time. Whereas in my new relationship, it's like, if I'm unhappy about something, if he's unhappy about something, we just talk, we bring it up immediately, we deal with it, we find a solution. And afterwards, we feel so much closer and so much more understanding of each other. And I think that that's, and many of you already know that that's a good sign in a relationship. It's a sign of a healthy relationship. So yeah, I love after love. I was a girl with a fairy tale in my mind, unwilling to face reality, unwilling to face myself. That was my first love. And now I'm a woman who is both open-hearted and trusting because I have embraced myself and my inner child. But I'm grounded in reality, and I am like so much more interested in giving rather than taking, and making choices to be a loving person every day, you know? And so, yeah, that. Oh, if you have questions, if you want to know more details, I'm very open to share. I just, everybody is different. Everybody's story is different. One thing I will say is that I've realized through all this whole experience that we all go through the same shit. Many of us go through similar shit, but none of us really care that much about each other. Like, do people really care about the shit that happened to me? Not really. Like, we all have our own shit, right? But I think that it's important to realize that we all go through the same shit, and that it's okay to share. It's okay to reach out. It's good to care. I'm not posting these podcasts because I want attention and I want to create drama. Like, I think a lot of people have this horrible like impression of my intentions. But I don't think that people should suffer alone, because we all suffer and we all go through stuff. And yeah, I hope that me sharing my story will encourage you guys to not feel alone. And I hope that I don't also pressure anyone to think that this is how things should be. Like, oh, she had a horrible breakup, but then she found love like 3 months later. You know, everybody's journey is going to look different, and like I told you, maybe my relationship won't even be a relationship at some point down the road. Who knows? This is just what I experienced, and I hope that it comes across as authentic. I hope that, you know, I don't appear like this little Miss Perfect who just has everything figured out, because I'm telling you, I struggle every single day. Like even today, we came late to the studio and still my ex and his partner showed up at the same time. And we were like dancing next to each other for 3 full hours. And I was so triggered today. And the whole time I was like thinking, don't let this affect my life. Don't let this affect my partnership. Don't let this affect my partner. Give him love. Fill myself with love, not fear. Like it's a freaking constant struggle. It's a constant struggle, you know, to love myself, to love my partner. Um, so I don't want you guys to think like, well, Little Miss Perfect, because yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. So yeah, I thank you for listening. Um, Maybe at some point down the road, I'll film another podcast about my personal life. But in any case, I see you soon. I will see you soon. Bye.